Welcome.
Hello, everybody. Welcome once again to the Smarten Up Show, where we discuss all things education and parenting and whatever else happens to cross our minds.
Well, anything to do with families, with kids, and yeah, and we've discussed in previous shows that parenting and education are not really two different things. So, yeah,
Well,
welcome.
Education's just the formal name for parenting. They professionalize it.
Right, and our slogan is "Train up a child." We've taken that from a Bible in the way he should go, and that is instruction for life. So that's our job.
Yep.
So good to see everyone here on the Messianic Lamb Network.
Leave us a comment. Let us know you're there.
Yes, we are also broadcasting on School Pods Canada Facebook page and a Smarten Up YouTube channel. So it is good to have you again. We're very passionate about families, about parenting, about knowing what the times are and how to deal with the times. And every week when we come here, we kind of look at each other and say, what is it that we've spoken to parents in the past week? What is it that has crossed our news feeds and so forth that we would like to discuss, because we want to stay up to date. We want to bring kind of the old wisdom of the Bible to the new day.
Mm-hmm. Because the Bible is a timeless book. The wisdom principles are given by God, who created everything, and so they are everlasting no matter what the circumstance, what the situation is in society. God knows everything the devil was going to do. He knows the human condition, and he's got the antidote for it, and that is called his word, which brings us wisdom.
Right.
And so something that we wanted to talk about today, and I think this is so critical, is, we're very focused on mindset here, because the way we think really dictates everything. And if we have bad thinking, then we're going to have bad results.
And I think I was inspired. Today's show was really inspired, the topic, by a quote I saw, just again going through my news feed,
Yeah.
which said, self-discipline starts in your mind with your thoughts. So if you cannot control your thoughts, then you cannot control your actions. Then you have no control over your life. And we've spoken in the past of areas of influence, areas of control that we have in our life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we are aware that we can't control everything in our life,
Mm-hmm.
and we can't do everything in our life. But the things that we can, that are up to us,
Mm-hmm.
start with our thinking, which translate into our actions, which translate into how we spend our lives here on earth.
One of the most impactful books I've ever read is What We Say When We Talk to Ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
It was written by psychologist Shad Helmstetter, who was quite a prolific author. He's written several books. He wrote this book back in about 1980, so we're talking almost 25 years ago, or 45 years ago rather. And the whole idea was about self-talk. And what he lays out is what we say to ourselves really determines what our outcome. So he kind of laid out the 5 different stages to our actions.
Mm-hmm.
And so he says, what we do is based on what we think. What we think is based on what we do is based on what we feel. What we feel is based on what we think. What we think is based on our attitudes. Our attitudes are based on what we believe. And what we believe is based on our programming.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you look at how the human brain is laid out, there are 3 components to it, very much like a computer. A computer.
Well, the computer was actually modeled after the way
after the human brain, and
Yeah.
so in the computer you have 3 components. You have your active whatever programs are running.
RAM, random access memory,
Well,
or
then you have
central processing unit.
well, then you have the RAM, and then you have the hard drive.
Yeah.
So the whatever is on your desktop, whatever programs are actually running, that's called the conscious mind.
Conscious mind, yeah.
And the conscious mind deals in facts and figures. And studies have shown that there's about 2,000 neurons that fire every second with the conscious mind. Because so what you're doing is you're listening to words and you're responding with words.
Mm-hmm.
The subconscious mind, on the other hand, is the RAM. That's everything that's going on in the background. And the subconscious mind works on images and emotions and things like that, which take a huge amount more of synaptic activity. In fact, they've measured and found out that in 1 second of activity, 2,000 neurons in the conscious mind, 4 billion in the subconscious mind in that same second of activity.
Yeah.
So the subconscious mind is 2 million times as big as the conscious mind. And then you have the unconscious mind, which is the hard drive, and that's everything that's stored. So every single
memory,
every word that's ever been spoken to you, every bit of stimuli, every experience you have is stored somewhere in your brain. Yeah. It's all there. We just don't know how to access it.
Right. Actually, I'm just, as you're describing on, I'm thinking of, what is it? Inside Out is the movie.
Yes.
And it tries to explain how our brain works and how emotions kind of play a part in our decision making. And so it's all of these 3 different components that you're describing. Yeah. They kind of interact as we are making decisions throughout our life, as we have thoughts and emotions and actions, and everything's connected.
Yeah. So what Helmstetter says is that our feelings are based on what our attitudes are, and our attitudes are based on our beliefs. Where do our beliefs come from? Our beliefs are based on what our programming is. So very much like what you put into the computer. When you run a program, when you run Microsoft Word, or when you run a video game or something like that, there's a line of code that's got to go in there in order to produce the results that we're getting. It's the same thing with our brains. Our brains are programmed, and that's why they call them television programs, because they're designed to elicit a certain way of thinking so that we will in turn respond a particular way. Yeah. And so if you look at what went on in the past, 4 years when the pandemic started, what were we getting all the time? We were getting a constant dose of fear, and every news agency around the world was given the same script. I mean, you can look at the videos and they'll all use the exact same verbiage and everything else. And what it was designed to do was designed to get people to comply, because they couldn't necessarily force you. They're not in a position yet, although they're trying hard to get there, but they don't have enough manpower to lock everybody in their houses. And so what they had to do is they had to use some sort of methodology in order to get people to do that voluntarily.
And emotions is usually the best way, because it's the most effective way. And so another thing I wanted to add is that the more time we spend on something, we practicing something, we create those neural pathways, and those connections get strengthened. And so we even meet adults nowadays who have had traumatic experience in childhood, and they're still avoiding things because something happened in childhood, and so that's how the brain works. That's how we know how it works. But we want to talk about how to reprogram our brain, because that's possible too. You don't have to be fearful of something that you had traumatic experience with in your past.
The most fascinating thing about the subconscious mind is that, number one, it's 2 million times as big as the conscious mind.
Yes.
And so if your conscious mind is telling you you're going to do something, but your subconscious mind has a different belief system, then you know what? Your conscious mind is going to lose every time. Yeah. There was a book written by a former Olympic athlete, Vince Posetti, called The Ant and the Elephant.
Yeah.
And it is a parody all about the conscious versus the subconscious mind. And so the ant is the conscious mind, and it's trying to get the elephant to go in the same direction. Now, if they're going in different directions, the ant is going along for the ride no matter what.
Yeah.
Okay, you're not going to get that to change.
Yeah.
But the trick is to be able to get the subconscious mind to come along with what the conscious mind is saying.
Yeah.
And the subconscious mind has no ability to discern between right or wrong, truth or fiction. It only knows what it's fed. And so that's why advertisers work in images as opposed to words. So you'll get the commercial that will tell you, they'll tell you let's take medication, for instance. The pharmaceutical industry in the United States is notorious for this. So you're going to have a commercial about this new medication. And at the very end, you're going to have a guy in a monotone voice going to tell you that
the side effects that you don't want to know about.
That's right. You're going to have limbs falling off. It's going to kill your mother-in-law and everything else. But what you're focusing on is the picture of the couple walking through the forest.
How you felt when you were watching.
Or you're walking through the woods and everything is serene. And if you take this medication, you're going to feel the exact same way.
All your problems will be solved.
They've told you the truth. Okay, they might run the words across the bottom of the screen, but your mind is focused on that. Same thing with beer commercials. When someone once said, every time at a beer commercial, you open up a beer and beautiful women in bikinis show up all over the place. But you know what? I've opened a lot of beer bottles in my life.
Right, and so this is
You've never come out in a bikini.
No, I wouldn't. So that just comes to say, how often in the past few years we have kind of looked at each other and said, we know a lot of people who are educated, intelligent, thoughtful people, and yet they fell for the seemingly emotional propaganda that was given everywhere. And so they've abandoned all their logic to make decisions based on fear and emotions. And so you often sit in here and think, why is that happening? Why are all these intelligent people who are supposed to even know science are seeing how science is being violated, and yet they are standing there and going, yeah, that's what we need to do. Like doctors say, yeah, take the shot without that shot being tested or anything like that.
Yeah.
It's just, again, we're not trying to have specific views, but it's kind of like, it makes you wonder, how is it that people who normally want every detail and want to research and know things sometimes just make decisions based on emotions? That's because those emotions that really the underneath their beliefs and everything is so much bigger than the information that they're learning and that's at them. So that is why, and actually the Bible has scripture that we need to hold each one of our thoughts captive under the obedience of Messiah. And
that's 2 Corinthians 10:5, that we are taking every thought captive and we are bringing them under the obedience of Messiah. And so what it's saying is, and if I had time to do a little more research on this, the brain has essentially, you have the upper part and the lower part, the higher level of thinking, but the way the brain is designed is that a thought or stimulus will go through the emotional part of the brain first. So you are inevitably going to have an emotional reaction to whatever comes your way, whether it be watching, it could be good or bad. You're going to have emotional reaction. And what the Bible is saying is you got to wait for that to transition to the logical part of the brain, where decisions can be made on what to do with it based on only what humans have. No other animal in the world has this higher consciousness. You have a moral compass. It says in Ecclesiastes chapter 3 that God has placed eternity in our hearts. And so human beings, unlike my 3 cats, who do not have this ability, although sometimes you wonder a little.
They're too smart.
Yeah, the way they look at you. But they don't have the ability to go against their instincts. The cat cannot say, well, I know it's dinner time right now, but, I really put on a little bit of weight over the last little while, and maybe I should lay off the popcorn or whatever it is. If the cat is hungry, the cat is wanting to be fed. It doesn't matter how many times it's been fed before. So what God tells us to do is take that thought captive and allow it to go through the logical part of your brain where there's an evaluation on what we should do. And the whole purpose in God giving us the new nature is that we're not going to respond the way that we once did in the flesh.
And as we speak to families, that's how kids respond, and that's why kids they almost don't filter their reactions, because whatever they feel, they react this way.
Yeah.
And the difference between children and adults should be exactly that.
Yeah.
Do we hold our thoughts captive, and do we think? And we've also talked a lot and extensively in the past how frontal lobe as adults should be developed versus the kids that don't have that developed physically. Right. And so thinking of long-term effects, how are my actions going to affect my future, how they affect other people around me, and things like that. So as we mature, we should be learning this. Mm-hmm. And as we are hoping to train our children, we should be teaching them. And so really, if the frontal lobe is not fully developed until the age of 25, it is an adult's job to sit there and have these discussions with the children and really try to take them through the thinking process of how to not react in the moment and start thinking about things. Remember last year I did what is a problem solving life skills thing with the pod, and there was a chart that I did with them. So when you encounter a problem, like let's have like a scale. It's almost like having the earthquake scales, right? And it said at the top, how big is my problem?
Right.
And we started with like, okay, your brother ate your snack or whatever. Is that a big problem? No, it's just annoyance and inconvenience. But honestly, you can solve that problem yourself, get another one or something. And so we kind of went to, okay, like people's lives are in danger. That's a problem. Then you need to, call for help and get professionals to come help.
Yeah.
And so it was a skill from that to that, and just being able to evaluate that, because, and so throughout the day after I introduced that scale to the kids, they would like go, oh, my pencil just broke. And I'm like, okay, we're on the scale of how big my problem this is, Do we need to get like really upset right now? And it's like really a bad situation, or is it just like a minor annoyance and you can go sharpen your pencil?
Yeah. So... and going back to our study on the temperaments as well, certain temperaments respond stronger because they have a stronger, it is built within them to have a stronger reaction to certain things. Some, the two of the four temperaments, the choleric and the phlegmatic, are make more decisions based on logic, whereas the melancholy and the sanguine, they tend to make decisions more based on emotion or how they feel. Yeah. Some temperaments are just wired that way, so it becomes more difficult, especially if your temperament mixes both of those emotional ones. And we know a lot of them that, something happens just like that.
Yeah. So if you're introvert, extroverts tend to like let it out. Introverts kind of, keep it in. So, and but because we're so different, some of us need to work harder at, controlling our emotions and our thoughts than others. Others like don't react, like the phlegmatics, they just don't rock the boat. Let's just think about this, And so, but the reason we are doing all these talks is because we need to identify. We want to help you identify who you are. How do you work, and which things you need to work on, which strengths and weaknesses we need to, work through.
Yeah.
And so that is why, there's adults and kids in the world, because the adults are supposed to teach the kids these things. And, I know that when I teach children, I know a lot of parents that I work with is that they say, I've never been taught this stuff. Mm-hmm. I've never, and so we have, people who haven't been taught these things in childhood. So they go into the world and have independent life, and they're learning the hard way.
Yeah. And like I mentioned last week, a lot of the lessons that I had to learn in life about how to be responsible and stuff like that didn't come till I was an adult and out on my own, because my my parents divorced, or they separated when I was 15, but there was very little guidance in that way because my parents just didn't know how. They just were
So
not
then they
capable.
weren't taught. They had nobody to say smarten up.
Right. And so, I came out knowing what I knew, and certainly school doesn't teach you this stuff.
Yeah.
And I got out in the world and I got hammered. I mean, some of the mistakes that I made, if someone had come alongside of me and sewn into me like we're trying to sew into our son, oh my gosh, my life would have been so much better.
Well, you're also the more of a risk taker kind of temperament.
Well,
and that's
yeah.
and that's why things kind of smack you a little harder when you do things, because you go faster.
Yeah. Well, high risk, high reward. Listen, the benefits are much better. I've gotten experiences no one else will get.
At least you're weighing it out.
Yeah. But you got the scars to prove it at the same time.
But having the tools doing it makes it less painful. Like, there's nothing wrong with being this, personality that takes risks. That's something that's kind of part of the learning process. Because if you never take risk, you never learn anything new. And then you just know what you know, and you're there where you're at.
Well, no risk, no reward.
Yeah.
And you never learn anything new until you step outside of what you know, which means that you're going to make mistakes. And see, even the way school is done, I've heard this analogy done many times. In school, you study, and then you take the test.
Yeah.
In life, you get the test, and then after you've screwed it all up and you've made your mistakes, then you study.
I better figure out
and
what
I was
I'm
like,
supposed to do here.
whatever I did to make that happen, I better not do it again, and so figure out a different way to do it. So, this is the whole PDCA, plan, do, check, adjust.
Well, and speaking as a teacher, often those tests, especially the standardized tests, children are taught to do well on the test, and as soon as the test is done, they forget everything that they learned. When life hits you, you never forget that lesson in life.
No.
So it's completely different style of learning, isn't it?
When it drop kicks you under the chin and you're lying on the back looking at the stars and going, what on earth just happened here? Then you say, I better make sure that I know what led up to that and not do that again. But sometimes people don't learn their lesson and they have to go around and make them same mistake. Yeah.
Well, see, that's the thing about life. If you don't learn the lesson the first time, you do it again.
Yeah.
It comes back, you know. And so I don't know. It takes enough time, and hopefully, and this is where we talk. I often talk to young people. If you don't know how to figure something out, because I have kind of preteens and teenagers I'm working with right now. There's a lot of emotion. There's like maths bad and blah blah blah, and then they go to
what are you teaching them in math anyway? We have a punching bag downstairs, and every time math class finishes, I'm hearing banging down in the basement. It's like as soon as I hear the singing, I'm up here in my office, and in the basement I'm hearing the punching bag go, and I thought, oh, math class must have just finished.
Oh. Did you want to add something? Our I think has to say something about math class.
Do I ever? Algebra, we have fractions, dividing, multiplying fractions, we have ratio.
I don't think your dad was asking for specifically what we're doing in the curriculum. He was just asking how come everybody's
I'm not asking you what you're learning. I'm asking you how she's
whatever it is, it's always a pain.
I'm asking her how she's teaching it, because obviously it's causing torment and great distress.
It is.
There's
wailing and gnashing of teeth going on.
Well, you know what it is? I just show them step by step systematically how to do things.
Yes.
So I teach them a concept. I have like hands-on things, and I do stuff with them, and then we do a question together. What happens is they just don't want to follow the steps. They want to figure it out in their head and put it out. And that is actually something that today's generation is, because we have everything instantaneous.
It's incredible.
It's instant.
Yeah.
We don't want to take the time to process. When there's a difficult concept, we don't take the time to dissect it and think about it. They want instant answer, and if they don't get the instant answer, we get a bit of drama.
Oh yeah.
And that's not just kids.
Well, it's the kids in big bodies. Listen, some people, just because they have an adult body doesn't mean the brain has actually grown. There's a difference between 30 years experience and 1 year experience 30 times.
Right. And sometimes I know a lot of people have gone through traumatic experiences, drug addictions, things that are have affected the brain work that actually prevents maturity to
Well,
happen
yeah.
properly.
So drug use will stop you emotionally growing the moment you start taking it. It's been known to do that.
Yeah.
And so if you start taking drugs at 17 years old and you're into your 30s and 40s,
Right.
you will still be emotionally a 17-year-old because you're not able.
Yeah.
The drugs inhibit that, but also when there's trauma. So if
yeah.
there's, an accident, if there's a death, if there's abuse or something like
Yeah.
that, it will create what are called freeze points emotionally.
Yeah.
And when you get a freeze point, you're not able to move beyond that. And so you might grow in other areas of your life, but when it comes to that area,
Yeah.
you have stalled out. And until, through the power of the Holy Spirit, you are able to move beyond that and start getting healing to that. But there's going to have to be pain in order for that to
Well,
happen.
yes, and then there's also a process through which you can work with your brain
Yeah.
to overcome these things. Like we do have, there's a Holy Spirit, but I don't want people to think that we're active participants in our healing process, right?
Mhm.
We have to decide that we want to learn, that we want to move on, that
Yeah.
we want to do new things. And so another reason why we wanted to talk about this topic tonight was because we've been I have been doing goal setting
Mhm.
with the pod, so that's the preteens and teens, but we've also spoken with 20-something-year-olds and 30-year-olds about the purpose of their life.
Yeah.
What they think they want to do with their life. What's their plan for their life? Are there any goals that they have for their life? And very often we will find that they have no idea. Um, with the young people, I mean, I'm kind of expected. I teach them how to do goal setting, but they don't know how to do it. They don't know, when we talk to some of them, oh, I want to really buy this video game, but I have no money, and the conversation stops there.
Yeah.
And they just sit there feeling bad that they don't have money to buy that video game. And I'm thinking, so this is all you're gonna say about this, and then you're gonna leave it? Like this
Yeah.
is just so unsatisfactory. So if you really, really want it, and if it's something that is a big desire of yours, then make a plan how to make money. Talk to your parents of what you can do.
Well, and a lot of people carry this into adulthood, and
Yeah.
we've experienced this over and over and over, where it won't just be a goal; it'll be a problem, and then
It's a problem.
and so what they'll do, not being able to achieve your goal is a problem, kind of in the mind as well. But what they'll do is they'll come up to you and say, "Well, here's a problem."
Here's my problem, and it stops there, and the thought process stops.
And then they just kind of look at you, and what they're saying is, "Now fix it.
Yeah,
make it better."
Yeah, I have no idea what to do, and so and this is why we often people, when they look back, they have regrets and things like that. And who was it? Chris Brady from Life Leadership. I think he wrote a book that started, what would I tell my 20-year-old
20-something-year-old self,
today, that I know today, that I wish I would have known then.
Right.
And this is where the Bible talks so many times about how the elderly should teach the young.
But if the elderly don't know, they can't teach anything.
So we have created generations of elderly people who haven't been taught any of these things, and it's time to get back to this.
We had a congregation a few years back, and we had 50 and 60-year-old people that were still dealing on a teenage level emotional maturity.
And it was because of trauma. Like, we recognize that it was, but at the same time, okay, so do we spend our entire life saying, I've had trauma and I can't do this? That's a sad way to exist.
Yeah.
And so and so they miss on all kinds of opportunities in life, because that's what they think. I can't do this because I'm afraid of this, because this is what happened to me.
Yeah.
So how do we get our brains to change? So one of the things is how to talk to ourselves, to recognize what beliefs in our mind are ungodly and wrong beliefs.
Well, and here's what Shad Helmstetter said. He said 75% of our self-talk is negative. On average, 75% of what we say to ourselves in the quiet of our minds, or sometimes not so quiet, is negative. We'll do something wrong and you'll say, "Oh, I'm such an idiot," or I'm so stupid, or "I
Yeah.
can't do this."
And that's what you have for the rest of your life, and you achieve
Well,
nothing.
yeah, because every time you say that, it reinforces a neural pathway that gets deeper and deeper, and it becomes like a canyon in your brain. And these electric impulses are going to take the path of least resistance. So when we're learning a new skill, we're having to carve out new neural pathways, which means that it's hard at the beginning. It's like going through dirt and you're starting to dig a trench. When is the hardest part of digging a trench? When you first get going, unless you got sand at the top and then, clay at the bottom. But the point is that the bigger a hole you dig, the easier it's going to be for the water to go through.
Everything's harder at the beginning. Working out, studying, parenting.
I remember when I first started taking martial arts when I was 16 years old, trying to throw a kick. I mean, you're flopping around all over because your body is trying to do things and your muscles are trying to do things you've never done before. And it honestly took about 6 months of working out on a regular basis, even before I got some sort of basic form in place. And then you start developing expertise. But those neural pathways are so critical. But if you're constantly reinforcing negative stuff, that's going to be the path of least resistance. But more importantly, that's what your brain is going to believe.
Yeah.
Helmstetter said that if anybody else said to you what most people say to themselves, you'd punch them out.
Yeah, and so
what do you mean I'm stupid?
And so what happens is like, at some point, without having these tools, like without our mindset, without having any goals, without having any plan, we try to do things and we fail. And I have an example. So oh gosh, years ago when I still was living with my parents, and somebody came selling like a membership to a new gym at my door. And I said, I'll try it out. And they said, oh, for like a really good cost, you can get your family members. So I got all my family gym membership for like a week to try it out. Right. Yeah. And so my younger brother went, and then my parents went, and they were out of shape. They weren't in good shape at the time.
No, round is a shape.
Yeah, they were in a round shape. Anyway, and so they went, and I went with them to encourage them and to do things with them, and so I watched them. So they were on the treadmill, and they were going hard because they're going to make this 1 week worth, gym membership, and they were panting and they were sweating
and
it was
lactic acid for 2 weeks after that.
And they said, no, we're not, and they gave up. They gave up on having a gym membership.
Yeah.
And so that's a lot of us like that. When we don't know when we don't have a plan, we don't have like steps and plan how to do things, we will just go for full speed to do something, and then we'll give up easily. And we'll say, I'm no good at this. I'm not doing that. And this is why when I was talking to the kids in my pod, I said, you need to set goals, and you need to set SMART goals. Now, one of the introductory quotes that I told them is that a dream without a plan is just a wish.
Yep.
So, everybody blows their candles at their birthday and they wish for things and they hope they happen.
Or what is the Disney song? When I wish upon a star, makes no difference who you are.
Yeah, I don't know much. I know Disney, but sure, I'll take your word for it. So, and what are wishes? Wishes are just thoughts we have, but we don't act on them. We don't do anything about them.
Wishes are what we want without having any kind of plan of action or any kind of intention of doing anything about it.
It's like waving a magic wand. That's a wish.
I have one of those.
Yes, I know. Darryl one.
I have a magic wand.
Yes, and you know what? When we wave it, nothing happens. But anyway, so that's a wish. Like we just
get dizzy.
A wish is something that if we don't do anything about it, it's just there in our head and doesn't come out in reality. So this is why I talk to kids about goals. But then kids think like, oh, my goal is to bring peace on earth, or, to save all the animals, endangered animals, or whatever,
Yeah.
Okay. So that's what I said. Okay, well, those are good thoughts. Those are good ideas. These are things that you could possibly do down the road, but we need to take some steps. So that's what I introduced them to something called SMART goals. SMART.
Which is the name of our show.
SMART goals. So see, this is why I like this, because it's got the SMART word in there.
You were in the SMART program when you were younger, weren't you?
Well, it was called TOPS.
Oh, TOPS.
They didn't call it the SMART program. It was gifted kids.
It was
program.
for smart people.
Well, I don't know. I hope it was
Without
smart.
the A.
Okay. And so not only do we have to not only do we have to have dreams. So it's important to have a dream, right? It is important to have dreams, because that's the subconscious. That gets our emotions. That's what inspires us. That's what is in our heart, like in your inner being.
Well, that is, of course, the center. The mind is, or the soul. What the Bible calls the soul is the mind, the will, and the emotions.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where all of the activity, that is your central processing unit. That's where all of the activity, that's where all the decisions are made. And then the conscious mind simply manifests those things. It instructs the body voluntarily to do those things.
Yeah.
But also the soul, or the subconscious mind, that's where the Holy Spirit interacts with us. So if you have something that's been laid upon your heart, here's what Chris Brady said. He says, if something makes you mad, there's a good chance that God has called you to do something about it.
Yeah. So it's not just stay mad, but start thinking, what can I do about it?
If you're passionate about something, then that is a good indication that is your assignment here on earth, to go do something about it and make it better. So if you're upset about child poverty or child sex trafficking, for instance, and it really gets you incensed, some people can think about it and say, gee, that's really a shame. It's awful. We feel really badly about it. But they're not motivated to do anything about, which means it's not their calling. And not everybody's called to the same thing.
You're not Jesus. Don't take on all the world to save.
So, but if something really gets you fired up, if it makes you emotional about, then that's a good thing. That's a good chance that it's something you need to start zeroing in on. Yeah. And then what you will most likely find is that there's a gift set that you have been given, spiritual gifts and also talents and skills that you are going to utilize in order to be able to accomplish that. That's a pretty good way of figuring out what your mission is and your purpose here on life is.
Yes. And that's another thing that I find it sad when we talk to people. So what do you think you want to do with your life? Like, what is your purpose? And I've talked to, even when I was saved, this one lady that we were friends with, and she's been a believer for quite a while. And here I'm a brand new believer. I'm like, oh, I heard God said that I want to be a teacher and work with kids. And she's like, how do you know that? I have never heard anything like that. So this is one of the things, is obviously working on your spiritual connection with God. But the other thing is to really find passions, to really try things and be out there and try new things, to find out what your passion is, and to really be in tune with yourself. So dreams are good, because dreams are the thoughts that should make you now translate into actions.
Right.
But without a plan. And so when God gives you something, but you don't have a plan and an action, then there's nothing. You don't really fulfill. You're not fulfilled because you don't fulfill your life purpose.
Right.
And another quote I really, really love is that from Wayne Gretzky. I'm not a big sports person, but that's a quote I really love, is you miss 100% of the shots you didn't take. So if you do not make a plan to do something, then you're not really making that shot, and there's no chance that you're going to achieve anything.
Not only did Wayne Gretzky score more goals in history than anybody else in the NHL, he also took more shots, and he missed way more shots than he took.
Right.
Or than he made, rather. He missed way more. So the number of shots that he took versus the number of goals that he had there's a vast difference. You know, he took thousands and thousands of shots. He scored 892 goals, but he would have never scored those goals if he hadn't taken the shot.
So he still achieved more. So maybe his average wasn't that great, but his achievement was great.
He didn't have the best shooting percentage in NHL history, but you know what? At the end, nobody remembers the guy who had the best shooting percentage.
Yes. All right. So so that's the thing. You know, if we don't have a plan and we kind of move on and we're not focused on our goals, we are going to obviously give up and just not really be very satisfied in life. And actually, I actually recommend to all the parents here, Sean Covey, who's the son of Stephen Covey. Now, Stephen Covey wrote the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, correct?
Correct.
Yes, I'm correct. So Sean Covey, when he had children, he decided he's going to write a children's version of that, which is the 7 Habits of Happy Kids. And so there's like 7 stories that teach the 7 success principles. So I highly recommend that. And actually, we just read this week the second story, which is kind of having a plan. So that makes you happier when you have a plan and then you follow your plan instead of being distracted by what's in front of you, like emotionally manipulated by media or whatever, or just distractions like the cat in my lap, right? And so I started talking to the kids about setting SMART goals, and so they kind of because it was it's January still and people are making plans and goals for this year and things like that. So I had them do a whole list. And they would do things like, oh, I want to learn Russian. One of the kids wants to learn Russian, which is great. But what does it mean to learn Russian? Because it could be something you do for a lifetime. I said, okay, let's talk about long-term versus short-term goals. Let's talk about what we want to achieve this year. So short-term is something you want to achieve within 1 year. And then long-term is anything beyond that takes you longer time. Because some goals do take us longer time to achieve. And so like, let's take learning Russian into, I want to be able to have a basic conversation. I want to know this many words or this many expressions and things like that in Russian. So when we started talking about SMART goals, the SMART stands for something. So SMART goal means specific. What exactly do you want to happen? Okay. So you learning Russian doesn't mean you have to be fluent in Russian. You just have to know enough Russian to speak to people or whatever. Da. I know. And he left today. He said, Paka. So he did. I know Russian. So that's, I'm like, I'm going to be checking on your progress because I know Russian. So specifically, so how many words, how many expressions, what kind of things you want to be able to say in Russian. Then measurable goals. How will you know you have reached your goal, right? So if you're able to communicate or understand basic conversation or things like that. Achievable. What steps will it take to reach your goal? And it's like, well, I just use Google Translate. I'm like, but how often? How do you use it? How do you memorize things? How, So again, that goes with, now you need to have steps. You have to have a schedule. How many times a week do you want to, for how long do you want to study Russian? How do you want to test yourself out or things? I mean, I'm using Russian, but think of any goal you have for yourself. You have to be a little bit more specific because, I want to be buff. It's not really a goal. I want to be able to lift that many pounds. That's something, more measurable.
I want to increase my chest size by 3 inches or something like that. It's got to be something that you can actually define.
Because if we break down a big goal, if we have a big goal, that's nothing wrong with big goals, but we have to break it down into achievable steps. Otherwise, just like my parents in the 1 week of gym time, they give up. You would give up because you need to do a little bit at a time. You want to challenge yourself, but not to the point where you get discouraged. And you're like, this is beyond where, it's beyond your ability because you have to step by step build your ability to get to that goal. You're not born, knowing or being able to do things. So S is specific, M is measurable, A is achievable, then relevant. I have a lot of kids make goals like, I want to beat this game or beat this level in this game.
Mm.
So, and this is what I talked about, relevant. Is this goal worth working hard to accomplish? Another thing, we're going to do another Chris Brady quote. He said, no, was it Chris Brady? Who said
It was D.L. The quote is attributed to D.L. Moody.
Yes.
And he said that your greatest fear should not be that you won't succeed. Your greatest fear should be that you will succeed at something that doesn't matter.
So relevant goal means that you actually work at something that matters, that really makes a difference in your life or somebody else's life. Because you know what? When we set goals, yeah, we want to get better ourselves, but we want to be contributing members to society. We want to impact other people around us, because if we live life just for ourselves, that's also not very fulfilling.
Mm-hmm.
So we want our goals to be relevant and to matter. Why are you going to spend time working hard on something?
Mm-hmm.
What's the big goal? And the last SMART goal is T timely. What is the deadline for reaching your goal? Because if you don't set a deadline, it will never happen. It will be like, oh, mañana, like the Spanish expression, mañana, mañana, mañana. Tomorrow, and tomorrow never comes sometimes.
Mañana is its own entity,
right,
in the Latin world.
So we want to push ourselves. We're going to give ourselves time limits, so that this way, when we look at a deadline, we don't procrastinate and be distracted by other things. And we want to also have those steps, and so that we can make it manageable and it's not too discouraging. I've had I was talking with kids, I want to travel the world in 1 year. It's like around the world in 80 days kind of thing. Well, how realistic? Especially, no, this was funny because actually I was tutoring kids during COVID and we weren't allowed to travel.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, let's not set that goal right now. Okay. Because let's do something a little bit more achievable.
Well, and this is the big problem with virtual reality and artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
Is that virtual reality, the glasses and the video games, and of course, when I grew up, video games had just come out. I mean, I remember getting Pong when I was young, the very first video game, and it was cool. And then you had the video arcades back in the 80s and early 90s. Geez, I mean, where I went to university in Toronto, there was like 3 arcades downtown, all right near each other. That was a bad place for a lot of people. Yeah, you start walking by and your wallet starts jumping in your pocket, wanting you to get out. But now video games are so sophisticated, and what they're designed to do is it's all about programming. It also has to do with the frequencies that are flashing and everything else. But one of the amazing things that video games convinced people of is that if you die, you can have another life. If you're a Pac-Man and you're going around and you get if you get eaten by one of the ghosts, you just get another life. And if you run out of lives, what do? You just stick in a quarter. You
revive yourself.
Yeah. And so it's led people to think that there's immortality. And what does this go back to? In the very garden where God says, or where the serpent says to Eve, you shall surely not die. It is the oldest lie. Okay. The first lie he said was God did not say.
Or did God say? Questioning what God said or
but the first lie that he told is God did not say.
Yeah, he did say that, yeah.
And he says, because God knows if you partake, he says, you will surely not die. And so this has been the big lie that humanity has chased ever since, is that we are trying to achieve immortality. But the reality is no matter what we try to convince ourselves of, and this is where, it comes back to what do we do based on what do we feel? What do we feel based on what do we think? What do we think is based on our attitude, and our attitude is based on our belief, and our belief is based on our programming. And if you're programmed with a lie, that is going to cascade down into everything that you do, your belief, your attitude, your feelings, and your actions.
Right. And and as you're making this list, as you're listening, I'm thinking we can control all of those steps of the process.
God would not have told us to take every thought captive. If he hasn't given us the ability to. Yeah. The problem is that we've never disciplined ourselves to do so. And for some people, it's hard to fight against their desires.
Right.
Woody Allen said, the heart wants what the heart wants.
Yeah. And the Bible says the heart is deceitful.
Above all things. And that's why there's this pastor that said at a church one time that I was speaking at, he said, your feelings will lie to you every day about what you need.
Yeah.
Because of our fallen, sinful nature. The heart is deceitful. It's going to lie to you. Your flesh says, I want another piece of cake.
Yeah.
Where your stomach is saying, no, that would be bad. But your mouth
Yeah.
wants it because the sugar is good and you know all the ingredients.
Yeah, it feel good now, but your health is not going to do well.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, you know.
I just went through a 2-week detox, and oh my goodness, there were a couple of really rough days, especially one where we were kind of getting rid of stuff there. And I mean, I was sick one day, brutal headache, because my body was getting rid of stuff that now it's been put into every bit of food that we have. There's almost impossible to get around it.
But some people don't even take the time to detox. You know, we all know, and so that's the thing. You know, we need to really have a plan of how to do the things that we know that are right and achieve them. Because if we don't put time limits on ourselves, if we don't have a date for our goal, well, we have a time limit to our life. We have to embrace that there's a time limit no matter what we do. As long as we exist in this world, there is. And so one of the things I just want to kind of go over before we wrap up here is the other side of the SMART goal sheet is a SMART goal reflection, because we need to really be clear what our goals are. So you reflect on what was your goal? Did you or not meet your goal? So you say to yourself, I did or did not meet my goal, and because you need to find out why. So this is the PDCA that we also talking about. Okay. So, you know, if we set goals, we'll be successful sometimes. So sometimes we want. You don't stop there and say, I didn't achieve my goal. Off I go to the next thing. No, it's time now to PDCA, plan, do, check, and adjust. So you've planned, you did, and now it's time to check. So why did you not achieve your goal if you did? And if you were successful, what contributed to your success?
Orrin Woodward says a goal is a planned assault against the status quo.
Absolutely.
If you're setting a goal, you are already intending on doing something that is out of the ordinary and above average. And so you are going to meet resistance. You're going to meet resistance. If I'm setting a physical goal, your body's going to fight back. It's going to say, I don't want to get up half an hour early.
I'm getting to that. So the other part of the reflection, once you kind of try out a goal, is overall my effort was. So you got to reflect on how much effort you put into it.
Yeah.
Like, how was your effort? Like, be honest with yourself. Yeah. And then obstacles are faced where, okay, the reason this is there because you will always face obstacles. There's no time you try to achieve a goal that there will be no obstacles. Like, whoa, that's what's smooth as butter. Like, never happens.
then your goal wasn't high enough.
Right. If you're not learning, then you're not challenging yourself. If you haven't grown in some way, you haven't challenged yourself enough.
Yeah.
And something I learned is, so every time, another reason to set goals and to try to achieve them, because there's always learning experience there.
Yeah.
And my next step is, don't give up here. Change your plan, adjust it according to what you learned, and try again. And that's called resilience. And that's what achievers do.
Yeah. So in order to be successful at something, we have to have something that is worthwhile to achieve, that's on our heart. And then we have to have a concrete plan to do it. It has to be timely. It has to be with specifics in mind. You have to have a plan of action. And then you've got to be willing to review that plan. And if you didn't hit your goal, whether it be in business, we wanted to achieve so many sales this year, we didn't hit it. What did we do wrong? Were there factors beyond our control, or do we need to improve something?
Yeah.
And through doing that, we're always going to improve. Even if you miss every single goal that you set, as long as you are moving along, you are eventually going to get to the long-term goal or vision that you have. But you know what? If we don't take control of our emotions, if we don't take our thoughts captive and bring them under the obedience of the Messiah, which means that we're lining them up with biblical principles, we are always going to be floating downstream like a dead fish and never achieving the high objective and assignment that God has given us on this earth to glorify Him.
And I just want to challenge families: start talking to you with your children about goals.
Yes.
As adults, model goal setting and strive for goals together. Do it together. Start practicing the skill, and I think you will find it very satisfactory, and you'll live a happier life.
Absolutely. So we want to thank everybody for joining us. We trust that this has been encouraging for you, and hopefully it's challenged you. And if you do set some goals, let us know. We'd love to hear what those are, and maybe we can encourage you more directly in order to be able to do that. And so with that, we will sign off tonight. Everybody have a wonderful week, and just remember, smarten up. We'll see you next week.
Yes, see you next week.
We are richly blessed to bring you what we believe is the fullest, most diverse, yet up-to-date progressive teachings, discussion, and prayer programming you can find anywhere on this planet. Be sure to take the tour of the MessianicLambRadio.com website. I'm Susan Hugie, thanking you for joining us on the Messianic Lamb Video Network.